You are listening to another Clarkesworld Magazine podcast. I'm your host and narrator, Kate Baker. Welcome to the third story for the month of April 2026, issue 235. This story, along with all of our stories in this issue, previous issues, and hopefully issues yet to come, are brought to you by your ongoing support. So thank you if you've subscribed, if you've gone to patreon.com/Clarkesworld, if you've chucked a few bucks our way via donation. Every little bit helps, and we know that times are tough, but thank you for as much as you can give. Our story is titled, The Trajectory of Memory is Forward, and is by Rajeev Prasad. Rajeev Prasad is a physician who lives with his wife, 3 kids, and a very cute dog in Northern California. His stories have appeared in the magazine of fantasy and science fiction, Clarkesworld, and several other markets. He thanks you for reading the story. And, if you like what you hear, we've got 4 other stories by Rajeev. Canyon Dance, The Blinding Light of Resurrection, The Flowers That We Intend to Share, and Mirror View. So, my dear listener, I hope that you can sit back, relax, and let me tell you a story. 1. Sky of Change. 3 hours ago, Darsh had woken in his seaside colony with a little more than a vague sense of himself. Now he teetered on an obsidian ledge as the checkpoint drones, shaped like metal gulls, circled below. 100 feet down the stone wall, 3 drones blasted Maxine with electroshocks, 1 fissure in her armor, and soulmates no more. She swayed back and forth as she kicked off the stone wall. The gulls stopped their pursuit and veered away, which seemed abrupt and unusual. "I'll drop before they come back for me," she said. His hand drifted to the buttons that would open the fabric of his flyer suit. He glanced upward. Only 50 feet to climb. He wavered. "I have a chance to finish the mission." "Get back home, Darsh. Don't you get captured. We have all day left together." Her steady, calm voice gave him courage, but he didn't feel good about leaving her. On the other hand, this had been planned out weeks in advance. The opportunity to steal a fabricator didn't come along often. She activated her wire electrical suit and lit up like an android-shaped light bulb. The drones streaked after her incandescent figure as she free fell. Her parachute flyer suit opened, and she glided over the dark mist of the sea. Seconds later, she hit the water and went black. Darsh turned his attention upward and scaled the remaining wall. The drones were still acting strangely and flying in random directions. He sidewinded through a long slit below the micro-fenestrated roof. Their colony robot had quietly chipped away at the hole a few days before. In the center of the mile-long dome, the square opening would serve as his escape route. His mission was to break into this have checkpoint and steal an old model fabricator. Seemed radical for hour 4 of his day, but so far, the task had felt instinctive. Earlier that morning, his colony whisperer had taught him his life story, and he'd received his skills training. Then he'd met his parents, brother, his love mate, Maxine. This was the common morning routine of every have-not. Inside, he made sure his electronic gear was deactivated. The system God would connect to any form of electronic intelligence. If captured, he risked imprisonment and the end of his story. Despite today's severe circumstances, he wanted that story to continue. He wanted to take his love affair with Maxine as deep as the day would permit. He wanted to be of service to his colony. With a firm grip of the edge, he dangled above a crop of a dozen or so mid-rise buildings. A hunting knife hung at his waist, along with the 4 propulsion devices to airlift out the fabricator. The jets along his belt activated, and his body wobbled in a pocket of air. He released and quickly learned that falling at quarter speed was still terrifyingly fast. His feet caught the edge of the rooftop, and he rolled to a stop on his back, staring at the clear domes above him. In a brown fabric gown and boots that encased his feet and calves, he ran down the 20 or so flights. His instincts, his skills on how to function as a thief, stayed locked in. These qualities carried forward day after day. On the ground floor, he stood in front of a wall that shifted like a jigsaw puzzle of building blocks. A doorway opened out to the street, colored golden from a row of incandescent lanterns. His skin tingled from the perfectly warm breeze. A diminutive woman blocked the narrow walkway. He mistook her for a child, but her face was that of a woman with a square jaw, crow's feet, and dusky, pale skin. Metal fibers and strands flecked her skin, red hair, even her eyes. She was a full-on cyborg. A have. He introduced himself as LQ, delivered a brisk index finger flick, and tapped on the roof of his mouth. Much like his rogue skills, his language recall remained intact, and he spoke have-ish. The verbal shortcut signified a curt hello and that he was in a rush to attend to business. She delivered a softer click and a quarter-angle nod. She watched him with amber-tinted eyes, threaded with a chrome spider mesh. Tharsh sensed her intense curiosity. She was calculating. When she didn't step aside, he reverted to regular speech. "I've returned after a short time away at the Sud-C checkpoint," he cleared his throat, "to exchange some new learning system information, which would be effortless if you were at all connected to our system god." A lopsided smile formed on her face. She ambled toward him with surprising speed and grabbed his hands. Her grip was hot and dry. A buzz that felt like sustained static electricity flowed up from his hands into his shoulders, and an ache seized the base of his neck. She leaned forward. The faint smell of rust permeated the air around her. "I don't want to ruin your life or to see it end. I need your help." A gasp escaped his lips. He reached to activate his propulsion cylinders on his belt. Time to abort this mission. She cocked her squarish head and wagged a finger in front of his face. "I wouldn't try that. Your friend narrowly escaped because I drew off the drones." "If anything happens to her..." "I've known this theft was coming. I've been patiently waiting to meet one of you. I'm here because I need you," she said. They remained frozen, facing off like two distrusting animals. "I'm not here to help you," he said. "I'll show you what you need to know. Follow me." "Come on," she said. He was stunned, unprepared for this type of encounter. He'd been instructed that the haves kept to themselves and wouldn't be a factor while navigating the checkpoint. "Don't try to fly off. The drones are still on alert, and we'll catch you. Then even I can't save you," she said. He loosened the fabric around his collar like she'd cut off his air, waking up every morning without a whisperer to tell him if his life story was his worst nightmare. They depended on their morning teachings, then on each other. This cyborg had spared Maxine and so far him, and he had no idea why. At this point, following her felt like his best option, but he kept his finger ready to activate his jets and get to the sea. He followed her out of the quadrant of mid-rise buildings and into an alley lined with dozens of abandoned miniature homes. He peered inside an open window. An old crib covered in cobwebs, pristine furniture coated in dust. Dried out, weather-beaten shoes lay contorted on the porches. A tipped-over rusted bicycle on a gravel path. "It's a ghost town," he whispered. 73% empty, to be exact. We glitch. We bleed. We die. Not enough children to grow up and fill the homes. That struck him as sad, unlike his colony, which was filled with young families. "What's your name, anyway?" "I'm known as ISO V3rd. "Ah, can I call you Vicky?" "I don't care what you call me." He followed her toward a clearing near the center of town. In a large plaza of white stone and flowering shrubs, a few dozen halves gathered. His body tensed, and he started to back away from her. "Don't be stupid. I could have turned you in any time. Stay hidden and listen." She waltzed forward on her short legs, her chin held up high. She climbed up a step stool and stood before the gathering. She made an open arm gesture, thanking them for their arrival. They then began communicating, sort of, without words. Within minutes, the amiable feeling vanished, and they were all shaking their heads violently. Arms were being thrown up in exasperation until somebody yelled, "Never!" Vicky's expression turned defiant, and her voice rang out over the courtyard. "We are dying. We no longer have enough children. Many of us are corrupting. We must reach out to the have-nots. We need their vitality, their desire to connect and procreate. We won't survive on our own. That much should be clear to us all. The Have's expressions remained grim and uninviting. He let the words sink in. After 1,000 years apart, she wanted the have-nots and haves to live together? He agreed with the audience. That seemed like a preposterous idea. One of the cyborgs spoke up. We trust in the system God to establish new patterns, new experiences, and kindle growth. Other checkpoints are still prospering. Migration is an option. The inflection point of recovery is long past. The other checkpoints hide their struggles. A different system God at a foreign checkpoint will not allow migration without radical re-engineering, if at all. The entire group stood motionless, not a sound, not even a fidget. Then, after their internal communion, one by one they peeled off from the plaza. Embracing the have-nots is a way to replenish our checkpoint. If our system God is unwilling, then we should find a God. Her head twitched, and she froze mid-sentence. She clutched upward for air, but her head remained cocked at 60 degrees, and she fell flat on her chest. They watched her without the slightest hint of concern. Then they left her to twitch. Darsh wanted to check on her, but he valued his life more. He skirted behind the art constellations of stone, thread, wood, and feathers rising into the sky. He learned that the haves lived mostly in flow, generative neural growth and interior connectivity with their system God and each other. The things to which he was accustomed, banter, voice, story, community, children, were conspicuously absent in the have life. He crept back through the empty blocks of homes and followed his instructions on where to find the fabricator, a recycling warehouse in the southeast corner of town. Some 30 minutes later, after several wrong turns, he entered the store, and facing him was an oversized cat, far plumper than the feral cats of his island home. Its fur was bright orange, eyes large and yellow. It immediately curled up to him, and he stroked its head. He'd seen a picture of these short-life animals that lived for a few weeks without any waste or needs, then found a hidden place to die and decompose. He raced through the warehouse, past pellets of expired nutritional edibles, an array of psychogenic tablets, various chip augmenters, cyborg body parts, and several composition starters for audiovisual generations. The cat followed him, trying to cuddle up against his leg. There was no surveillance inside the warehouse. There were also no labels. He turned to the cat. Where is the fabricator? Fabricator. The cat paused, then swiveled around and led him to a corner where a 4x4 silver metal box stood. Smart cat. He stroked its soft fur, and it purred lovingly. He wiped the cold sweat off his brow and calmed his breathing. He disconnected the source materials, wood, paper, plastic, rubber, metals, biologics. What was left was the quantum processing unit and printer inside a metal crate. Once he got the fabricator back to their colony, they'd reinstall the raw substances and print out processing chips, wind turbines, even infusions and medications that they couldn't effectively build themselves before the device burned out. He hoisted the fabricator onto a set of rollers. The machine was 100 or so pounds heavier than he'd anticipated. He rolled it out to the back alley. Still not a have or a drone in sight. Once outside, he removed the pressurized air launchers from his belt. He stuck the foot-size squares to each side, pressed each of the buttons, and the turbine engines fired up. He shielded his face from the hot air, kicking up dust and pebbles. The unit began to hover and rise. He fastened 2 suction cups under the hovering device and strapped in his wrists. Within seconds, the turbines roared up to 100%, and he was airborne. The air traffic antenna lit up red, and a siren blared. He glanced down as he picked up speed through the opening in the dome and into the cool atmosphere. Red lights flashed from the antennae, bathing the tranquil have checkpoint in red. 2. The Desperate Sea. The winds buffeted Darsh as his hands clutched the handles on the underside of the flying fabricator. The deafening jet streams heated the air around him. He glanced back at the checkpoint situated on the archipelago surrounding the Havana mountain. So far, nobody was chasing him. The choppy gray sea stretched ahead. He didn't remember experiencing an actual storm, but he had an intuition that life at sea was generally a life of storms. Some sort of instinctive clock let him know that he'd reached hour 6 of his day. The time went fast. After flying a half-mile, the homing beacon and the propulsion device keyed in on a skiff being tossed around in the waves. When his feet dangled a few feet above water, a small cartridge opened from each propulsion unit and released a ribbon of dense orange fabric. The fabric inflated rapidly into tire-shaped balloons. He released the cord holding his wrists, and feet first, he plunged into the sea. The cold water shocked him, but he oriented and swam fluidly. He felt at ease in the water. With long strokes, he reached the fabricator floating on a set of 4 inflated tires. Under the water, he heard a slight drumbeat, a distant sonar impulse that originated at his have-not colony. His sonar organ under his left ear, a tiny bone labyrinth that amplified impulses and conducted them to his skull, picked up the beacon. The faint signal pulsed through the raucous sea, due northeast past the Gulf spine, and into their archipelago. A cord of rope dangled off the edge of the skiff, and he tied it between the skiff's latch and the inflated raft. The top panel of the fabricator opened, and chrome-flecked eyes wide with terror stared back at him. The Have woman from inside the checkpoint crouched inside. He pushed away from the edge. A wave rolled over him and he spluttered. How? What? A second wave splashed against the inflated rubber, spraying her. She huddled into the tiny space in the corner. A metal matrix shaped like an egg with a printing platform in the middle took up the rest of the crate. He coughed up the seawater he'd swallowed, the salt drying out his mouth. What in storm's name are you doing here? He grabbed the edges of the ship and circled around toward the stairs. He pulled himself aboard and sloshed around the bow. Get out of my fabricator! You did steal it from us. Are you going to drown me? That didn't seem like something he would ever do. Far too violent. He offered a hand to pull her onto the vessel. Well, come on out then, but you've got some explaining to do. I saw you. Glitch. Thought you were dead. She blinked rapidly, and like a water-hating cat, she tiptoed into the vessel and huddled on the bench. Every Have has a generator unit. Mine was right here. Until an hour ago. She pulled down her collar, revealing an empty socket where a portion of her collarbone and neck should have been. The flesh was still raw, and tiny cut wires, like electrical mesh, stuck out from the tissue. She shook her head in disbelief. But not anymore. You pulled it out of your body? It's retractable. I had to get it out before the system god fried me for good. What you saw was a warning glitch, a chance to get my affairs in order. Your people, this god of yours, turned on you because you want to save them. Your checkpoint is a bleak place. They would rather stay in the status quo of the system god. They can't find the will to make a drastic change, even when it's obvious that drastic change is needed. Why me? I needed a have-not. I was going for a round of show and tell to advance my proposal. Never got the chance, she said. I'm not going to help you. No, with you, I could navigate across the sea. We could travel to the interior, to a god's city. This is the first time I've ever been disconnected from our system god, on my own, in 196 years. He wiped the salt water dripping down his face as feelings of resentment and anger saturated his thoughts. This woman did not care about his colony and people. Why should he care about her? He was supposed to resent the haves. They wreck the earth and enslave the have-nots for centuries. The interior is dangerous and unpredictable. You don't know what you don't know. Imagine returning to a god, the a god of the interior. Storms, no. We're going to my colony. The Whisperers will decide what to do. Tarsh took a seat at the stern and steered toward their colony. The propulsion engine churned white frothy waters behind them. He hoisted the old-fashioned sail and caught a faint eastward breeze. They sailed with the current, passing between 2 islands along the Gulf spine. He knew this sea well from prior travels that he could not remember but knew he'd once made. Cutting through the sharp waves felt like an unearned gift. He looked upward at a glint of metal streaking through the atmosphere. The interstellar train from the interior was like a shooting star in broad daylight. As the brilliant speck vanished, she made a little flourish with her hand. The speciation project was started so that we could migrate to space. The climate back then was severe. Intense heat, rising seas, hurricane after hurricane. Speciation was our chance to become more biologically resilient for space life. A god created new traits and modifications of the genome. Like many of the projects, memory engineering happened by accident. We are more than an accident, he said. When you fall asleep, proteins and neurotransmitters prevent most of your memory images from storing. It's engineered down to the germ cell level. So if I were to release one of my remaining ova, and you and I procreated, I'm not sure if the offspring's memory would be intact or not. It's a gamble. Darsh raised an eyebrow, trying to fight down the rather unpleasant image. That's not how we do procreation. I need a god to convince the halves to act. My belief is not enough. The same people who left you to glitch and fry. Your plans are all total rubbish. The seawater sprayed them as the hull hit a wave. They bounced on the surface and Vicky screamed. I don't want to die this way. You're not going to die from a wave. Lots of those out here. Despite her foolishness, she was starting to feel sorry for her predicament. She was desperate and her plan sounded delusional. He didn't blame her for the actions of her long-dead ancestors. In fact, he wasn't truly resentful of the halves. The history he'd learned this morning felt far removed. In this 6th or so hour of this new day, he felt that resentment and harboring ill was basically pointless. His clock was ticking. The hours were too precious. The riptide emptied into a shallow lagoon. About 15 meters underwater, a reef teemed with coral and schools of fish. Vicky peered into the water on the other side of the raft. This fabricator will last a couple of weeks before its systems deactivate. From what I know, we max produce until it burns out. Then, they will risk another rogue like you to steal again. He shrugged nonchalantly, but he didn't like the sound of that. If you are only living for the day, is it a day of your choosing? She dropped her head into her hands. There were no actual tears, but she sat frozen like her circuitry was acting up. At the very least, she was sad and scared. The system god was going to fry me into oblivion. I've been branded a heretic. I had no choice but to escape. An alarm went through his thoughts like a chime through a steady wind. His eyes narrowed. Are we in danger? Have I put my colony in danger? She shook her head. Not at all. This outdated fabricator is recycling to us. The system god and the halves couldn't care less about these wild colonies of yours. Ouch. That stung. Yet you are the one who thinks we should live together and procreate. We all need to change our misconceptions. People will adapt to survive. We must. She tried to stand aboard the vessel, but she wobbled. He caught her hands before she tipped over. Her gaze sharpened, and she held on to him firmly. Like the first time they touched, the same strange heat and warmth of her electrical conduction spread up his arms into his jaw, and the dull ache at the base of his skull. Something inside him felt activated and restless, filling his entire mind and body. When she released, the sensations vanished. She clutched the edges of his ship as a wave buffeted them. The briny smell of decaying kelp and small fish filled their heads. After the swell quieted, she whispered, I'm glad you were the one I found. 3. Sky of Memory. In the gray lagoon, Darsh pressed his feet into the sand, the waves rolling against his chest. Many of his brothers and sisters raced out from the caverns carved into the mountainside. Maxine splashed through the water and leaped into his arms. They sank under the water. Her body pressed against his, and she kissed him wildly. It was a nice feeling to be loved, to be wanted, It was a nice feeling to have had a successful mission. But not everything felt right. His head hurt with a new restlessness and discontent. Finding Vicky had changed all his plans. The boundaries of a day were washed aside. The hours had become less measured, the potential greater than he'd ever imagined. Maxine slipped her arms around his waist in the shallow waters. I was so worried. After I dropped, I had no way to contact you. We're both together for the rest of the day and every day after, she said. It's been a day. Tomorrow is a new life. Tomorrow is a new day, Maxine echoed. And if I hadn't made it back? She narrowed her eyes inquisitively and pulled back her black hair dripping with seawater. I never thought that way. I knew. He turned to the group of friends. Though they didn't remember, they'd all shared in meals, adventures, laughter, seafaring. The memories were short-lived, a mere day, but the bonds between them felt more lasting. Their stories together were all journaled and part of their lore. This connection felt stronger than the one based on memory, which was inherently fallible and corruptible. I'm about to show you something. Do not be alarmed. Vicky stood aboard the boat. She lowered herself over the edge and splashed through the shallow waters. On the beach, with her arms outstretched, she wobbled uncertainly. They all looked at her quizzically at first until Maxine said, You have brought a half to our colony? She's a cyborg. She's not a threat. She saved us from being captured. She wants passage to the interior. The others gasped, not sure whether they were more shocked about the have or the interior. Who cares what she wants? Maxine said. As he watched, new powerful currents gripped him, the desire to expand, the desire to adventure. The same strange ache started at the back of his head. Underlying these impulses was a burning desire to know more. Vicky wobbled and veered off course as she tried to walk, and Darsh caught her. She was heavy for being all of 4.5 feet tall. This is so wrong, Maxine said. Doesn't feel that way to me. She's desperate, Darsh replied. We must take her to the Whisperers immediately. They marched across the crescent beach that ended on a rocky plateau stretching up several hundred feet. Square cave entrances and formations were carved into the bluffs. Wind turbines that produced their electricity perched on the ledges, and green storm-resistant drapes protected the doorways. He kept Vicky close as they walked under the sun-blasted rocks. From the cavern, hundreds from his clan emerged onto a wide plateau, set a dozen feet above the sands. Darsh didn't recognize the faces, but he felt the same familiarity as when he'd arrived. His sea-worn, wrinkled parents and older brother ran over to him. After they embraced, they watched him with Vicky, and they saw that this day had taken a radical turn. With change came the fear of loss. Even if each day was new, knowing that the routine in relationships would be the same was the major solace for all of them. A dozen sitting areas, each with a ceiling lamp spilling golden light, punctuated the large plaza. Cauldrons of stew and loaves of bread were laid out. The briny smell of shrimp and small fish imbricated the cavern. Bowls clattered and ladles dropped as they waltzed through the crowd. Carved in driftwood panels on the walls were hundreds of family trees. Beside them, holographic faces floated and videos played. Early this morning, with a whisperer to guide them, Darsh had learned about his family and the stories most relevant to him. Then he'd spent an hour with Maxine, his parents, and his brother, before refreshing his skills and going out on a mission. The northern tunnel led to the craft and the artisanal camps, schools, and trading posts. The eastern tunnel led to the engineering quadrant that descended into a long finger of reef, where they farmed shrimp, fish, seaweed, and basic staples. The short western tunnel ended with 2 massive driftwood doors, pale and gray like the skin of a whale. He, Maxine, Vicky, and 2 guards passed through the doors into a long hallway, lined with prints that chronicled their colony. He had not visited the sea womb earlier that day, and the dark room that smelled of freshly cut wood did not feel familiar. Darsh stared at the paintings and screens of the migration that a few dozen ancestors had undertaken from the interior more than 1,200 years ago. Above them on the dome roof, a map of the Gulf and Atlantic spines, with the location of each have-not colony. The nagging ache at the base of his skull flared, and he clutched his neck and moaned. The desire, the passion to know it all, seized him. He fell to his knees. Darsh? He buried his hands into his face, feeling oddly ashamed. To live with their history was to live with grief. To know history intimately was to be grief. To be only in the moment seemed like a luxury that he'd lost. In the days of his life that had preceded this day, he had never experienced a crash out like what was happening right now. So much to learn. Maxine and the guards stared at him in bewilderment. For Storm's sake, you're 9 hours into today with so much time left, Maxine said. Something's changed. Like something in my mind snapped, he whispered. Maxine spun around to face Vicky. What did you do to him? Vicky's chrome-laced eyes peered into his face. I haven't done anything. He saved me out at sea and brought me here. Get away from him! The soldiers lifted him off his knees, and he limped past dozens more murals. In his mind's eye, each parchment burned like oil fire. Oh my God, Darsh. Every hour is precious. We've already lost so much of our time together today, Maxine said. I'm not thinking that way. Maxine stopped and grabbed his shoulders with both hands. How else could you think? Us? He knew that the wrong answer here might unleash unspeakable wrath, but he couldn't bring himself to say a thing, and that silence was incriminating. Her lips tightened, and she pulled back from him. After all we've been through, each day for 10 years, I barely made it to the skiff this morning. Since then, I haven't stopped worrying about you. The end of the sea womb opened into a cavern. Inside were 7 driftwood chairs. A tall man wearing a dark green robe beckoned them forward. The tension in Maxine's body and the anger in her face evaporated. She bowed her head in deference and respect. Darsh stumbled toward him first. Based on all he knew from his daily log and journal, he was in completely uncharted waters. The other whisperers began to arrive, each wearing ceremonial green robes. One side of the womb opened out onto a ledge, and the panel of blue sky appeared more brilliant than it had been before. Honorable rogues, Darsh and Maxine, I am the eldest, but please call me Atom. You come back home with a have. I was hiding in the fabricator. He didn't know, Vicky said urgently. Occasionally, surprises happen. You speak our tongue well, Atom said. All languages are available to us. This might be a first in the have-not history. Have-not seem like a reductive name for your people, Vicky said. Atom nodded in a way that indicated she wasn't wrong. We tried a few others, the strugglers, the chosen ones, the sea folk, but have always settled on the have-nots. The name represents our history, our biology, our species' start. She opened her hands and fingers like she was allowing sand to slip through them. I wanted to bridge our two peoples, and that plan failed. Failed badly, Darsh said. I must find a god in the interior to bring the system back to our checkpoint, she said. All the whisperers were visibly stunned. Atom muttered, Nobody goes to the interior. I have flown over it, still wild but not like before. Your old stories of terror and bloodshed are dated, she said. Why in Storm's name would we help the haves? I have been banished, rejected, left to die. A god is my only chance to survive. A god is the only way I can save our checkpoint from slow extinction, she said. And you assumed we would simply cooperate. The hubris, Atom said. I needed to do something extreme. Surprises can happen. Darsh stepped forward and told the story of their escape, but he gripped his temples and spurted out. Pain keeps flaring. Adam pulled back his hood, revealing thick gray hair and green eyes set in a smoothly shaven face. He approached Darsh and lifted his chin. Your face is like an ugly storm. I can feel the words rattling around in my mind. The pressure. Adam's expression was startled. He rubbed his temples and laughed in disbelief. What are the chances of 2 firsts in a single day? What is happening to me? Darsh said. The pain is psychic, the pain that a whisperer feels when the journey begins, Adam said. Meaning what? Meaning you are a whisperer. What? He's 30 years old. Maxine knelt beside him and put an arm around his shoulder. Rare, very old. But it has happened before. Maxine paced with furious steps. This can't be. This is a mistake. Darsh must start his learning, his training, or he won't survive, Adam said. Our days together are over? She said. You've been a part of each other for a long time. You have your journal of all of your days together. Your affections and love do not end or go to waste. They are embodied inside you and written in our lore. Are you okay with this, Darsh? We're planning for a family, Maxine said. I don't think I have a choice in the matter, Darsh muttered. They kept talking, Maxine trying to make sense of what was happening. To Darsh, their words became incoherent garbling. He didn't need more explaining. He knew some force was breaking apart his psyche, the joy of being unencumbered, of living with a moment, an hour, even a day was lost. After a few minutes, tears streaking her face, Maxine hugged him desperately and said, We should have had more days together. I love you, he said. Her lower lip trembled. Tomorrow is a new day. You'd think that would make it easier, but it doesn't. Darsh watched her go. This should have been a wonderful day with her, another entry in their journals. What should have been many more days had ended. He turned to Adam and said, 10 years together, and now we start over. Adam's nod was one of sympathy. He too had gone through the change long ago. Tomorrow it will be easier for her, but she will mourn. She is the day, the moment of living. You are a whisperer. You live for our lore and your duty to study the past and ensure our colony's future, neither of which is the luxury of present experience. I can't change that, neither can you. It's a psychic thing, biological. He collapsed back against a chair and slumped. Storms is right. 4. The Relentless Fire. Adam reclined in his driftwood throne as he sat across from Darsh. None of us remember after the first sleep, just as none of us will remember after the final sleep. I wake no different than you. I study my journals. I spend the first half of my day reading our lore, studying our history. Only then do I start the awakenings. The 6 whisperers around Darsh nodded their agreement, all displayed a gentle firmness, the way many teachers did. We learn how to awaken each of our brothers and sisters, always the most crucial step of each day. It is the personal, intimate event that has enabled all of our progress, Adam said. The same pressure that had momentarily relented now flared at the base of his skull. Under the pressure was the wild desire to learn more, to learn it all. We are all have-nots. The difference is that a whisperer knows history intimately. The impressions leave a mark. All in here. Adam tapped his skull. You will recall faster with more time and study. All from this psychic crash-out? Tharsh said. Something deep, limbic and thalamic, triggers the waking. There's no going back, my friend. You must keep learning day after day. And you must teach what you know. For a lifetime, really. Vicky, who had been listening quietly, said, What you are describing is progressive system learning. Regardless of your memory impairment, your creative and executive functioning abilities are whole, perhaps more advanced. We weren't asking for your advice, Adam said. Vicky continued. The mind stores repetitive experiences and projects the patterns. It projects what should happen before the event happens. That's how we generate perceptions and act accordingly. Your inability to imprint short-term images and memories hasn't prevented your minds from doing this essential process. Adam turned back to Tharsh. By week 3 or 4, when you start to dream the lore, when the stories snap into place with a few seconds of learning, then you're on your way. Tharsh pulled away from Adam and ran to the opening toward the ledge. Thin sheets of rain glided across the sea. The storm had arrived but peaked much further up the spine. These rains might last for days, replenishing their fresh water and irrigating the beds of roots and vegetables. The cold wind blew over his face and rain splattered him. He lowered himself to a knee at the cliff's edge like a praying man. His head felt like a fireball. The grief came like the rains that mingled with his tears. The known joys, leisure, food, Maxine, future children, love, and intimacy, felt pointless. Adam hurried over the slick rock and grabbed him under the arm. Tharsh, you can't fight the change. It'll drive you mad. He guided him back inside through the sea womb toward the entryway. As they reached the first hologram in scriptures, the parchments brightened with a backlight. As he read, the words came to life quickly, like the story had already been inside him, stored away. The have-nots were an early product of speciation, considered at the time to be an error in memory engineering. Like all species, we'd been developed in the interior by a god's experiments in genomic architecture. Memory engineering prevented us from synthesizing and storing our immediate daily images and names, but other cognitive functions and connections were heightened. We did not go extinct, and the haves saw an opportunity to exploit us. After the great flooding, the haves sent us to explore the drowned islands and swaths of coast. Then we were sent to work on the interstellar trains and settle the deep space satellites. We suffered, and most of us died young. We served the haves as laborers and servants for centuries. Most of those early stories are lost to us forever. A god took speciation to extremes. The evolution that followed proved to be a relentless and lasting force. The interior became violent and war-ridden with variants. The haves lost control and migrated to the Atlantic spine and Gulf colonies. During this time, the first whisperer of the have-nots emerged. Her name was Taline. She created our systems, our written logs, our hierarchy, our roles. Other whisperers emerged. Once these whisperers organized our people, the have-nots fled the interior and settled in the Atlantic spine at safe distances from our captors and enslavers. The words seeped into his mind like rainwater, into parched sand. Tharsh read their early history, read about the first Gulf colonies, the first whisperers, their customs and practices. Interestingly, as he would never think to want memories like the haves, neither had their ancestors. This was their biology, and they had evolved other parts of their nature, instincts, self-awareness, cohesion, community. There was more to identity than memory alone. The sea-based traits evolved over the past 1,000 years as they settled the Atlantic spine. After he finished the first set of parchments, the psychic wound closed. These stories were his stitches. Adam's steps echoed on the stone floor. You'll find with time a sentence or two, and you will find the entire story inside. Do you feel better? Vicky's small figure sat motionless a few feet away. Her head was angled down and her eyes closed. Adam brought his face down to her level and peered at her rather rudely. So, my cyborg friend, What should we do with you? You find yourself stranded in a have-not colony. The indignation played on the metal strands in her smooth skin. My own family calls me a heretic. I am the one speaking the truth. I am the one trying to bring the haves and the have-nots together. Adam frowned and shook his head. You may need us, but we don't need you. We will not risk being enslaved by your people again. We have all the technology, all the homes, all the resources you could ever want. You don't need to steal. You don't need to suffer against the elements. I can't speak for the other colonies, but we want nothing to do with your plans. The haves are my obstacle. Only a god is strong enough to dismantle the influence of our system god and change the status quo, she said. For all we know, a god may be dead. You are free to leave. We do not take prisoners. We do not harm travelers, Adam said. Vicky stood up, barely reaching Adam's chest. She strolled around the sea womb, examining each story panel. Darsh sensed the same calculating sharpness he'd seen in her before. I won't survive without a new generator unit. Which is no fault of ours. Nor my fault that my connection triggered Darsh's change into a whisperer that prevented Maxine and Darsh from certain capture. Our connection is live, a conduit. Adam paused, his bold and confident expression waning. I would like Darsh to accompany me, she said. Absolutely not. A whisperer is born. He is one of the highest duty and calling. And something in our connection triggered this change. I can't explain that, and neither can you, Vicky said. He must learn daily or he will crack, Adam said. She tapped her forehead. I've learned all your stories and tidied your history into neat lesson plans. He will learn more from me in a shorter time. We don't leave the seas. Our colony, our community, our ritual is what defines each of us, Adam said. You leave when you steal a fabricator from our checkpoint? I left my home because I need help to save my checkpoint. You being here is an untimely coincidence. Such an event does not exist. Vicky dropped to a knee in front of Darsh. You saw our colony. It is a shell of what it once was. We are dying. I am dying. We won't assist you, Adam said. Wait, Darsh said quietly. I want to help her. Maxine jumped up like a young girl, her face glowing. Darsh, you can't be serious. You're a whisperer now, Adam said. We'll approach the lessons fast and determined. Write it all in your journal if something happens to me, Vicky said urgently. Adam slapped her across the face. He tried to push her away from Darsh, but she remained doggedly in place. He turned toward Darsh. We can't survive without each other, without our journals, our customs, without a whisperer to awaken and teach us. We embody the colony, and the colony embodies us, each and every day. I can't leave her to die. She saved me and Maxine. Darsh, nobody goes to the interior. We have terrible stories that date back 1,000 years. Those stories are so old. It's time we learned new ones. Our two peoples have been intertwined since the beginning. We might just be able to benefit from each other if we all abandon the status quo, Darsh said. They enslaved us for 1,000 years, Adam said. We are in a position to help ourselves. No more thefts. Maxine almost died out there on mission. No more people dying from storms, no more illnesses we can't treat, Darsh said. Her own people reject the very notion, Adam said. Once I get her to safety to the interior, I'll make my way back. Taking this risk feels right. I have a journey to make. It's a special one, Darsh said. We live for one single day. She has lived for 3 generations. This choice is madness. Adam's face tilted downward, the color in his face vanishing into a gray dejection. Vicky will have to be my whisperer. A new chapter of our history is starting, Darsh said. Vicky's face broke into a smile. Be sure to bring the primitive shooting devices and trapping mechanisms and food. I don't know what we will find out there. You'll likely die with her in the interior, Adam said. Say goodbye to Maxine today, and each day after. Tell her I'll remember. 5. A short sail through the cold dark. Darsh woke to the sound of waves splashing against the side of the boat. His eyes were crusted shut. As he peeled them open, the salt water slapped his face with a sharp burn. It felt like morning, but it was still dark, the beginnings of a white glow on the horizon. He sat up and faced a squat woman on the other edge of the two-person skiff. Metal strands streaked along her hair and through her face. Chrome veins laced her amber eyes. Your name is Darsh. That I know. Where are we? On a ship in the Gulf Sea, near the interior. That doesn't sound right. I'm Vicky, your friend. You're safe. You are where you intended to be this morning. She pointed to his chest. Take some time and read your journal. He undid a strap under his shirt and brought out a water-sealed journal. There were 2 messy entries. The first was several pages. The last, a page. He unclipped the pen and read the more recent. Darsh, if you're reading this, you've survived your first 2 days away from home. You're 30 years old. You are well regarded by your people. You had a wife, Maxine. If you make it back to the colony, you'll see her again. But she will have moved on. Know you loved each other. The lady across from you is a have. You are a have-not. Vicky remembers. You do not. That's the way of it. You come from a rich colony, one with a long history, safety, wealth, progress. But out here, she and this journal are your only lifelines. Strap this journal to your body and keep it dry, and for Storm's sake, don't lose this thing. You're taking her to the interior to find a god. She saved your life, and now you are returning the favor. Her people, the haves, are dying, and she is trying to save them. Once you've helped her, you've got to make your way back home. You are a whisperer, an incredible honor, the leaders of your colony. If you don't keep learning our lore and history, your head will feel like an exploding firecracker. She needs to teach you. Write it all down. When you leave her, you've got to have it all handy in the journal. Read your journal. Read every page 2 or 3 times a day. Start journaling from here on out. Don't stop. Record everything. And draw yourself a map so you can get back. You come from a great home. A great place. An incredible life. Make it back for us. He read the preceding pages, then shut the notebook and resealed it. So, how long have we been on the water, and in what heading? Don't worry about making a map. I've recorded all the distances, directions, and landmarks. I'll show you. Daily, please. I'll jot it in here. We've had a good current in calm seas, getting close to the shores. The interior's a big place, a dangerous place. How far do you need to go? She slouched, appearing crestfallen. Due north from the coast. I've seen the old capital from the air, forests and fields and empty buildings. First, I must locate a god, but I have no idea whether it will repair and help. Well, that's not so promising. The sails caught a surprise wind and the skiff picked up a few knots. He weighted the skiff evenly, turned down the rear propulsion flow, and opened the sails. It didn't surprise him that these things came to him naturally. They ate the dry rations and stared out over the water that reflected the light like a mirror. It's calm now, but a storm will hit by tomorrow. How would you know? He shrugged. An instinct. Life at sea is a life of storms. A sense of regret, like she was mulling over things that she could never have changed, played on her face. Each morning you have the same character, same values, same instincts, same body. The halves based our growth and evolution on memory, especially generational memories. Even after death, the system God creates an imprint that is conscious and evolving, based on memory and identity. Even after death, we can still be with the ones who have passed on. It's hard to let go of the ones you loved. Sounds like our people would rather dwindle than risk that. We cling to our identity at all costs. We suffocate the chance for something new to emerge. If only for the few precious hours of the day, living is no less incredible. Darsh eyed the dark line in the distance. They had reached the interior. His body shuddered and he leaned back in the skiff. His hand drifted to his chest. I get the feeling that we shouldn't be here. I have the supplies. If you want to leave now, I won't try and stop you. From what I've seen and read, you won't make it very far without a fair bit of survival training. He rubbed the back of his neck that ached like he'd been struck with a hammer. It spread along his spine. Vicky shuffled beside him and played an audio lesson. The story was about a god, speciation, the wild interior, the migration to the Atlantic spine, Talene, and the Whisperers. As he listened, he registered that he'd learned all this before. The teaching snapped back into story form immediately. He scribbled and sketched when he heard. After the halves abandoned and disconnected from a god, each halve checkpoint created a limited system god, but the halves were determined to not repeat the same mistake. Each system god was created to be a limited operating interface. That didn't seem to work out the way you planned, he said. It did for a long while, but living inside a bubble can be insidious. Our perceptions, creations, even thoughts became intertwined with the system god. Our identity is a back and forth, constant reflection between us and the system god. The boat hit a swell and rose a few feet before plummeting nose first in a white splash. He spluttered and wiped his face. The seawater cooled his hot skin. Vicky clutched the bars on either side of her with both hands, the skin of her fists pale and white. Why do you think the halves will find what they need in the interior? Will your old god care anymore? If I can bring a god back with me, inside me, it can dismantle the system god. It has the power. Then the halves might listen to reason, she said. So you plan to bring a bomb to blow up your old systems, he said. It's not a bomb, simply a break in their operating system so they can see clearly. Sounds like a bomb. She sighed but didn't disagree. I've lost my entire community. I've lost my system half. After 3 generations. So much time you'd think I'd be ready to leave this place. But I want to remember my parents, my child, Susan-2W. I want to see more of the sea. As you put it, live the precious hours of the day. And you want your brothers and sisters to do the same. I do, Darsh. I want them to live again. Darsh took down the sail and adjusted the rudder toward an outcropping of shoreline, hoping he might find a bay to dock the skiff. The waves were rolling in faster, stormy winds flowing from the east. What is it that you want? She yelled over the skiff's puttering engine. Right now, I feel like I know so little, but I'm here with you. I trust the choices I made the days before today. That's the way it has to be. She scooted in the seat next to him. I've already learned from you. My hunch was right. We need the have-nots in our lives. As they approached the bay, the storm currents picked up, and the skiff rolled, head to tail. They cut the current and spilled into the shallow bay. Halfway to the shore, the skiff's bottom scraped rocks. Darsh tried to pull the skiff toward the deeper waters, but they bounced off another boulder. Vicky fell to her side, and Darsh grabbed her before she fell overboard. The boat spun and lurched on a wave. A grating sound filled the air, and a black rock pierced the hull. Seawater began to flood the floor. He threw over the orange raft which inflated adjacent to the boat. He helped her climb onto the raft that bobbed next to the impaled skiff. Darsh loaded their supplies, and they floated to the rocky shores of the interior. 6. The Wild Earth. At the top of a stone and sand bluff, they peered over rolling green forests and hillsides. The shrill calls of seabirds echoed from their nesting rocks. The fecund steam of the forest rose above the canopy. Darsh had salvaged the ship, but it would take days of work to repair the hull. The system god's city is around 100 miles north. Before they removed my generator unit, I monitored the communications between some of the robots that still inhabit the interior. How? It's incredible how much you don't know, she snapped. How little your whole species knows. A little condescending. You would be flat dead without me. You've lived for a few hours. My memories, my identity has persisted for more than 2 centuries. Yet you are the one who needs us. You are the one who feels so wrong despite being so privileged. The scowl on her face eased as she recognized her own conceit. I'm sorry. I'm worried. Can you see why we have-nots never reached out to the haves for help? Why we stayed wholly apart? There's always been an imbalance that the haves can exploit. They trekked down a ravine and through the red rivers brewing with the leaves of the forest. She awkwardly moved around roots and through the underbrush. 2 hours into the hike, they followed the roar of water until a white mist wound through the trees and enveloped them. Darsh stopped mid-step and held up a fist. He pointed toward a bend in a tributary. The person slouched on his side, the water lapping against his head. In the same way that Darsh had felt that Vicky was physically different, this man was wrongly sized and disproportionate. The man stirred and sniffed the air. His squarish head popped up, and he pulled himself to his elbows. He peered around the shallow river crossing and over the surface of the water. I think he's fishing, Darsh said. His head swiveled back and forth, and he sniffed again. They had been quiet and remained hidden behind the gnarled trunk of an oak tree. The man rose to his full height and shook off his waterlogged robe of knitted scales and fur. He ambled around the knee-deep water. Let's go, Vicky said urgently, but a touch too loud. His head turned in their direction. He strode toward them, water sloshing, ripples spreading through the lagoon. They raced back into the underbrush. Soon they were scampering up a hillside. Did we lose him? Vicky gasped. He practically sniffed us out. That's not normal, Darsh said. They trekked around the ravine and up another hillside. He didn't see any signs of the giant. They stopped to catch their breath, and Darsh took out a short rifle from his pack. He loaded it with a cartridge and strapped it over his shoulder. They resumed the climb when a loud howl sounded from the bottom of the hill. The giant strode through the watery ravine, his body shaking with excitement. He trotted his way out through the ironwood trees. They skirted along the edge of the top of the hill. Below them, the forest rose like a green tide over the hills. Darsh positioned them on top of an outcropping of boulders. He climbed the largest boulder, giving him a clear view down the hillside. Keep your eyes peeled in case he tries to flank us. Vicky nodded and leaned against him so that they were sitting back to back. She was small but heavy. The chirps of sparrows and robins grew louder until some 15 minutes later the birdsong quieted. He's here, Darsh whispered. Vicky's breathing turned shallow and fast. The giant emerged from the ferns and ambled up the hill like he was in no rush at all. He was about 8 feet in height, with lopsided fat and muscle around his back and waist, and thick clumps of hair over his pale skin. His torn-up robe covered his body in the shape of a tent. When he was about 30 feet away, his face broke into a wide grin. Dynamical reality is the normal state of our existence, always in motion, always intersecting thought with matter. That's far enough, Darsh called out. Thought penetrates matter, makes sense of matter. The flux of sensation, the dynamism of thought is what orders the atomic dimension. You can leave now, the giant continued with his scientific sermon, and Darsh fired a warning shot that ricocheted against a nearby boulder. The giant stumbled back and covered his ears. After the echo faded, he pulled up his robe and sat on his bare buttocks. When the fauna grew from the earth itself and began to move, they were called flora. He chuckled. Imagine that. Our definitions are so arbitrary. We are passing through. We mean no harm. Who are you? Who is a limitation, a construction. What should I call you? She calls me Bear Hunter. Bear Hunter, leave us or I will shoot you dead. I'm counting to 5. As Darsh adjusted the rifle's sights onto the bear hunter, a pain triggered at the base of his neck. It leaped up over his skull, over his eyes. He wanted to clutch his head to ease the ache, but he held the rifle firmly. A moan escaped his lips. The giant's eyes perked up with a new predatory light, and he crouched with a hand firmly on his sharpened staff. Counting is the meaningless ordering of infinite choices in the atomic and subatomic dimensions. What is it? Vicky said. It's the same pain as this morning. This is not the right time. Can you hold it off? Darsh clutched the rifle, but the pain spread. The giant took another few steps toward them. Flank, Vicky hissed. An instinctual discipline kept Darsh's eyes fixed on the man. The pain enveloped his temples and eyes, but he focused on his breathing and kept the rifle steady. He heard the rustle and caught the scent of unwashed hair to his left. From a nearby grove, another giant, a woman with a lopsided face, sprinted toward them on all fours. The man bounded up the hill until he was a few feet away when Darsh fired. The bullet lodged in the giant's thigh with a thunk, a splatter of purple blood, and he fell flat on his back. He flipped over onto all fours and scampered back down the hill into the cover of the ferns. Darsh turned to see a woman with scraggly black hair launch at them. Vicky leaped up, and after a short tussle, they both went spiraling down the shrub and rock facade about 20 feet down. Darsh scoured for any signs of the man, but the hillside was empty. He climbed down toward their screams that echoed from the ravine. Vicky's arms firmly planted on the woman's shoulders, her heavy metallic weight pinning the giantess to the ground. The giantess failed, and her claw-like hands had torn off patches of Vicky's skin on her arms and back. Darsh pressed the rifle butt into his shoulder, ready to fire. He staggered back and forth as the headache turned severe. He was starting to see stars whenever he blinked. Are there more of you? The giantess cocked her head, large black eyes staring at him. The divinity of the cosmos demands conviction. Are there more of you? His voice sounded like it was caught in the vacuum of his skull, echoing in its empty chambers, rising against the vice-like pressure. He fell to a knee, struggling to keep the rifle up. When the Lord cast forth the harmonic radiance of the prime nebula, life was nothing but energy and matter. We are the chance aberrations of the Lord's work. Vicky glanced at him. Advanced vocabulary, but not much sense. To you, each abomination is the child of God, and God is the untoward need of the atomic cosmos. She grinned and stopped resisting Vicky. Her skin was asymmetric, like her face, and her teeth were sharpened like those of a shark. She's wild, he muttered. A type of savage hominid that has survived in the wild. There were dozens of speciation mishaps like this, some variants even more terrifying, Vicky said. He stood up and tilted back his head and breathed through the pain. Let go of her, slowly. I'll keep the rifle on her. She's fast and strong. You can't pin her down forever. The giantess spewed all sorts of gibberish and seemed to be oblivious to her predicament. Vicky took a breath and lessened the pressure on the giantess's shoulders and leaped back. A few meters from them, the giantess lay contorted on the rocks. The divine energy signal is the same for a blade of grass as it is for the abomination itself. Her brain seemed to be on overdrive, words rolling off her tongue. She jumped up in an athletic move and stared at the two of them. An instinct came over her and she crouched low, claws extending to her side. Darsh noted the outline of her ribs and sallow belly. She sprang toward them. Darsh fired. The bullet passed through her neck and she squirmed and writhed before collapsing in a still heap. Vicky fell to her knees. She covered her face with her hands like she could hide the unspeakable cruelty of murder. She was starving and violent. We didn't have a choice. That's the first time I've seen a person killed. We don't have violence in the checkpoints. We don't see that side of things. The terrible side. We should cover her with some rocks and fronds. I'll pick some flowers and pine branches. She was a person. What happened to her was not her fault. Vicky covered her body with the fronds of a nearby fern. The way a person dies matters. She said it like she'd learned something. The rifle fell from his hands as Darsh keeled over. Vicky ran over and laid his head in her lap. She started a lesson from the device embedded in her forearm. The audio began and immediately felt familiar. What remains of the interstellar train system and the satellites is unknown. The trains still run even after speciation has long ended. The trains still run long after a god went dormant. The millions of hours of our have-not labor and lost lives amounted to little. The have-nots and haves migration to the spine constitutes the second era of our people. The third era that followed was one of proliferation. The emergence of our whisperers established our leaders of the second era. The first steps taken. Vicky played the rest of the lesson. Her gaze remained downcast and fixed on the giantess. Occasionally, she grimaced and shook her head violently. She could not make sense of the barbarity. Darsh unstrapped his journal and short-handed the teachings. The pain abated, and the words soothed his headache and eased the restlessness. Occasionally, scenes of that long-gone era would materialize in his mind's eye. This was a brief chapter in their history, but these teachings felt less direct than he'd expected. Based on what he'd written in his journal, the current lesson felt censored. He glanced at Vicky, who was lost in her own worries and abstractions. Was she hiding something from him? She had a reason to keep him loyal. He stood up and strapped the journal back in the dry sack on his chest. I can move again. The pain is gone. Wait here. I'll be back. He eased his way down the hillside, his rifle nestled in his shoulder and his head swiveled from side to side as he passed through the grove. His feet slipped on the moss and pebbles. The peaty and fertile scents of the forest invaded his throat and lungs. The branches and leaves whooshed above him in a long-drawn breeze. He caught the trail, the specks of wet blood on the dusty ground and mangled roots. He stayed hidden, gliding between ferns and shrubs. A few 100 feet into the forest, he reached a shallow pond. Here, he lost the blood trail. He did a once-around, but no signs of the bear hunter. The big fella had swum off. He raised the rifle to the sky and fired, the shot silencing the glorious hum of the forest. 7. The ground that grieves. They gathered up their gear and marched along the plateau. Thick fists of cloud rolled in from the sea. The breeze was laden with moisture and the taste of minerals. Darsh took long strides over the uneven terrain, putting as much distance between them and the surviving giant. After a few miles, they were drenched in sweat. The air thickened as the hour of the thunderstorm neared. Flocks of birds rose from the canopy, looking to hide from the storm. The next headache came on more gradually than the last two, more like a restlessness. When he closed his eyes, he envisioned his ancestors marching across these lands during a far more violent and wilder era. They'd been hunted and chased like him. The rains and storms had washed away their tracks where he now knelt on a bed of moist grass. I need a lesson. To a god, the permutations of genetic coding and nano-embryonic engineering became endlessly fascinating and challenging. The moral repercussions were lost on a god. The haves turned a blind eye to the things they had lost control of. The haves continued to evolve with machines, rather than risk biological engineering. 100 species of hominid variants had been produced, and most died within a generation. Most never made it to space. The have-nots became useful to the haves for many centuries as the climate changed in unpredictable ways. They were the explorers, the workers, until the first whisperer, Talin, led their people to freedom. The first Gulf colony was formed in the flooded panhandle of North America, an archipelago of islands. The have-nots sent the first 7 principal whisperers to 7 different islands. Darsh finished the lesson some 10 minutes later. He stood and brushed the grass and twigs from his pants. The learning put the fire out, but he could still feel the restlessness, like a hungry parasite waiting to be fed. Would this craving be a part of him forever? He kept his eyes on Vicky as they marched, his suspicions growing. "I know you're hiding something. Where'd you get these teachings?" She described to him what had happened in the sea womb. "We've suffered. It's in our DNA. I know that. What you're teaching me is not that. The lessons you're feeding are fake. Show me the originals," he said. "These are the originals from your colony." He believed her, but the last lesson had felt inauthentic. Could the machine part of you be altering the lessons? "There is an entire set of biosynthetic chips optimizing my physical functionality, thought, feeling, even judgment." She closed her eyes and did some sort of internal surveillance. Her eyes widened and her jaw dropped. "I knew it," he said. "I've altered the teachings without being aware. Looks like I did it for me. My computing functions are working to mitigate adversity and negativity like the system God did for me back at home. Back at home, there are no giants trying to tear you apart. Given this extreme situation, I've taken your whisperer's teaching and made them soft." He laughed. He couldn't fault her subconscious computing functions trying to spare her from more pain. "Softer, kinder history. Right now, that's not so bad. But once we make it out of here, I'll need the real stuff." The rumble of thunder and the song of the storm filled the cloudy sky. As they trekked along the crest, he noticed the worn footpaths embedded with stones snaking up from the forest floor. The plateau widened, and silver metal glinted in the distance. They approached a robot propped up on a stone altar. They circled, but it remained inert. Vicky poked it in the head, and the robot tipped over with a loud clang. A few dozen desiccated corpses formed an audience facing the pedestal. Each small human skeleton possessed a thick flap of dried skin with bones in the shape of a leather cloak. Darsh walked through the graveyard. "There are a lot of sad stories here." "Some of the saddest," she said. "I think they poisoned themselves in front of this robot," he said. He clasped his hands together. Vicky followed his lead. This was a prayer, but he had no words, no God, nothing divine. Eyes closed, he allowed for the grief and mourning. The small tweaks, tiny changes to an already imperfect organism, had led to madness and ailments and grotesqueries. The animals and forests had survived the changing climates, but humans had not. A mighty thunder rolled through the sky, and the rain began to fall. The sky opened. Giant lush drops splattered against the rocks and fronds. They descended on the hillside due northwest toward a god. The sheets of rain fell like waves of arrows. The canopy roared and the trees shuddered. The ground under their feet turned damp and slick. They stumbled and shielded their faces to the elements that did not care of their history or their wants. 8. Sky of Courage. The water lapped up against Darsh's face. He coughed and sputtered, clearing the water from his lungs. The faint sunlight filtered through the low-hanging clouds. He pulled himself to his knees along the banks of a flooded lake. Bruises and scratches covered his face and chest, a tender lump near his temple. A bag was strapped to his back, and he guessed it had helped him keep him afloat. He shook himself dry like a wet animal and squeezed out the water from his tattered clothes. Watery currents moved slowly through the flooded forests. Flies and gnats rose like puffs of gray smoke above the green mounds of grass. Many things had gone terribly wrong, or he wouldn't be washed up and nearly drowned on a deserted shore. Inside his back satchel, he counted 8 nutrition bars. He ate 2 while he noted the long ropes, hunting knife, rifle without any ammo, a short-hand axe, matches, tinder, and a few other essentials. Under his shirt was a thin, waterproof bag strapped to his skin. He opened the clear case and found a journal tied shut with a strap. He read the last entry. "You are a have-not. The woman with you, Vicky, is a have. You do not remember when you awake each morning. She does. You can trust her. You were on a mission into the interior with her, but the storm changed all that. The rains don't stop, the forest is flooded. But still, he pursues. Vicky is getting weaker, the rains affect her badly. After 7 days, she's taught you all there is to know about our history. It's all in this journal. Read every day, keep learning. You must or you will go mad. You are a whisperer. Your people need you. You are somebody valuable. Find a way to get back home. He is on your trail. He is relentless. There were dozens more entries prior to this last one, which he read through quickly. Maps, drawings, a history that dated back 1,000 years. Their current journey. The bear hunter. He read it all again. His situation was dire. He and Vicky must have been separated in the flood, and he'd floated downstream. The sun broke through the dispersing clouds, the yellow blanket falling on the lush canopy. The rocks and fronds still glistened with rainwater, which meant the storm had ended recently. From all he'd read and the way he'd felt at that moment, he wasn't the type of guy who would abandon her. And at this early waking hour, his character, his sense of what was right and wrong, was all he knew. She might have drowned, but there was a chance she'd climbed a tree or made it to higher ground. Unfortunately, the bear hunter might have done the same. He scoured the shores of the lake until coming upon an uprooted tree on the hillside. He hacked apart 8 branches and dragged them to shore. He arranged them into a crossing pattern over which he placed large fronds. He then roped it all together into a makeshift raft. It wasn't pretty, but it floated. He balanced on the crisscrossing branches covered with fronds without falling off. He fashioned a makeshift oar from a flat branch and pushed off into the lake. He rowed hard to overcome a gentle current. The lake stretched a clear mile toward the mangroves. He imagined himself as a little white splash in this gray, watery world. Dolphin fins broke the surface not far off. He smiled for the first time that day. The sea beasts had meandered upstream into the lakes and marshes where mudfish and crabs were abundant. He felt a longing to get back to the sea, almost a heartache. His home in the Gulf was far to the south. Soon after, he saw the long, reptilian bodies streaking across the lake. He drew his arms and legs back into the raft and rowed furiously to get toward the tree line. A large gator, nearly 15 feet by the look of it, languidly swam toward him. He studied the speed and rhythm of his rowing. It came close enough to touch, the black slits in its green eyes narrowing in the sunlight. But it kept on swimming, deciding that this splashing raft was not a suitable meal. Once he reached the mangroves, he knelt gingerly on his raft and began pulling himself from branch to branch, making his way upstream through the wide channel. The heavy, fecund marsh air weighed upon him. He'd likely lost Vicky, but he didn't want to feel that he was alone out here. He didn't want to give up on them and what they'd accomplished together. After a mile through the mangroves, the marsh ended on a pebbly bank. A sloping grassy hillside continued upward toward a forested plateau. Further north, a cloudless sky stretched. On the banks, 100 gators basked and warmed on the rocks and compacted sand. Their gray and green scales reflected the sunlight like a reptilian tapestry. A couple submerged into the water as he approached. He followed a tributary away from the gators into a lonely inlet. He waited for many long moments, but nothing emerged from the shallow bay. No bubbles escaped to the surface. He jumped into the water and pulled the raft to shore. His heart pounded in terror until his feet were on firm land. He scampered up nearly 50 feet. He sat and wrote and let the sun dry his wet hair and clothes. I find myself in search of a have-woman I do not know, but whom I have entrusted myself to. My day is nearly half over. So far, there is only an abundance of creatures. This place is ruled by reptilians. This is the way that perhaps the earth was intended to be. Wild. The lands are flooded. There are no other signs of haves or have-nots. There are no signs of other human species. No signs of the bear hunter who pursued us. It is a watery world, but I am at ease. I know the sea is to the south. I owe her another day of search. Then I must abandon her and find my way back to my people. After he wrote, he scrolled back dozens of pages of their history that he had written verbatim from Vicky. The restlessness and agitation in his body eased as he studied and remembered what he had forgotten. The stories came back to him, hurled forward from the dark expanse of his mind. His journal was enough for now. There was still so much for him to accomplish and explore, so much knowledge that he needed to bring back to his people, so much he needed to write down. He felt a glimmer of confidence. He had become a true whisperer. He sat and sketched the 2 gators that had followed him to the cove and now lay on the sandy bank with open green eyes. He sniffed something distinct. It was acrid and bitter, and he recognized it as fire. He hurriedly stuffed away his journal and gear and pulled the raft to safety on the banks. He climbed the bluff and trekked over the boggy ground, around puddles and through groves of giant trees. He lost the scent several times, but as the breeze shifted, he picked it up again from somewhere deeper in the forest. From a hillside less than a mile away, a single spire of black smoke rose. He ran through the underbrush and slowed as he neared the source. He lightened his steps to avoid squashing the leaves, still wet from the rains. In a small clearing ending in a limestone wall that leaked water and from which ferns grew, a small campfire burned. A chunk of meat smoked in a pile of rocks. He peered closely. It was a human arm, the skin blackened and blistered. Not far away, a woman sat, tied to a sapling, her arm down to a stump above her elbow. He'd found Vicky. He quietly opened his backpack and gripped his knife. His heart pounded wildly. His mouth turned dry. There was nobody else in sight, but the captor wouldn't have gone far. He slunk around to the sapling and cut the tightly woven reeds that wrapped around her waist and chest. Her eyes were bleary and her bruised face listless, but she nodded at him in recognition. She slid around the tree and into the cover of the shadows. He glanced at the arm, and it occurred to him that it may be useful. He ran into the clearing and snatched it off the rocks, slipping it into the lining of his jacket. They ran hard through the dense forest. After 10 minutes, a thunderous scream pierced the birdsong. They followed a forest trail that emptied out into a sea of green grass. Vicky began to slow. "It's not much further," he said. "Gosh, I can't go on." He pulled her along, but she stumbled. He tried to pick her up, but she was far too heavy despite her small size. "The bear hunter will find you again," he said. "I've lost blood. My nervous system is glitching without a generator unit. He sawed through my arm. There's nothing left of me. Go on now." "Is he smart?" "Not logical. He's instinctive. Predatory." He found a place for her in a tall stretch of grass. "Lay still here. If I don't come back soon, then you're on your own." "Why risk yourself, Darsh? Get home," she said. "We've been through a lot together. I'm determined to help you. You have been my teacher. You are my friend." She slid a finger across her throat. "It would be much easier for us both. I'm ready. Your journal should be enough to keep you sane until you reach home." "I want to save you. I want to save this journey. It means something more for both of our peoples, not just for you and me. Besides, leaving you behind wouldn't solve the little problem of the giant. Stay hidden." He took her arm out of his pocket and ran with it held high. After a mile through grasses that reached his chest, he climbed a hillside and looked back. In the near distance, the bear hunter ran off balance, occasionally on all fours, limping heavily. His square head popped up and his gaze settled on Darsh before he vanished into the grass. In an all-out sprint, Darsh crossed the bluffs and reached the shoreline where the gators teemed. He ran back and forth, a few feet from the gators with the arm held high. The reptilians shifted their attention quickly, the ones nearest to him slithering toward the scent. Toothy grins and yellow and green eyes bore down on him. They climbed over each other toward the mangled arm that Darsh sat atop a large, smooth boulder. He hid behind a tree a few feet away. The giant crashed through the tree line moments later. "Oh, what nature of man and beast does the cosmos exude into the oblivion of complete and total harmony, the intersection of waking and dreaming and parsimonious Pythagorean theorem." He spotted the arm on the boulder and crouched, his head swiveling from side to side. The nearest gators hissed and slapped their tails, but couldn't scale the boulder. The giant crept forward, a sharpened staff in his hand. Matter is an illusion. Nothing is constant except the brutal brilliance of harmonic movement. The giant paused near the boulder and whirled around, striking the air with the staff. Once he'd turned back to the boulder, Darsh leaped from his hiding spot and swung his hand axe at the giant's leg, but the giant turned and caught Darsh by the throat before he could land the blow. Within seconds, his two massive hands encircled Darsh's throat. Darsh's feet dangled 2 feet above the ground as the giant choked him. He swung with the hand axe, and the blade landed on the giant's hip. The choke tightened. He twisted and kicked the blade deeper into the hip, and the giant staggered back. Darsh's feet hit the ground, and he launched himself into the giant's chest. They both rolled down the stones into the gator pit. Darsh scrambled up over the stones, avoiding the snapping jaws of the gators. The acrid reptilian scent filled his lungs. When he climbed to the first flat rock, he reached for his axe and swung wildly, but the giant was still sitting amongst the rocks, calmly unperturbed. She called me the bear hunter. I was her bear hunter. A gator had clamped down on his leg. He didn't try to fight. He stared upward and mumbled his gibberish. The gator ferociously twisted its jaw and head. His leg fractured and mangled. The bear hunter screamed as a sound of snapping bone penetrated the violent beauty of his incoherence. 9. The Revelations. Darsh read through his journals and sat in the morning light listening to Vicky's faint, weak voice. Her accounting correlated well with his journal entries. His clothes hung loosely on him. His belly rumbled with hunger, but he was far better off than Vicky. The frayed electrical wiring stuck out of the burned cap of her arm like metal whiskers. The left side of her face had decayed over, revealing an empty red socket. Each movement left her wincing in pain. 9 days now. The storm let up for a day, then another flood hit. The marshlands and lakes keep spreading. He pointed to a pocket of blue sky. The storm's lifted. The air feels light. I'm sorry for dragging you out here. Did you know it would be like this? I flew over here 7 years ago on a pure play robot. There were a few more human variants around the forests and shores, but it looked deserted. A flyover doesn't prepare you for what's actually inside. He patted the journal next to him. There's so much in here. We've added to history. This adventure between a have and have-not will become a part of our lore. I've accomplished nothing. You have a life ahead of you, an important one. You can't save me. I don't believe I can save others at our checkpoint. We evolved into a blind corner. Even if we fail, we learn. We try. She smiled at him and shook her head in disbelief. So free, unencumbered by regrets, even wants. That's the only way I know how. They packed their meager belongings and kept due north, at times walking, wading, or climbing through the forest. At midday, they built a small fire and cooked 2 crabs they'd foraged. You've completed all your lessons. Learned it all. He rubbed his neck and temples. His thoughts felt clearer. I'm not having the pains that I describe in my journal, but I still feel restless, incomplete at times. She snapped her fingers like she'd remembered something important. I should give you a copy of all the lessons. An implant. That doesn't sound like something we do. Of course it's not. But as the saying goes, evolve or die trying. He chuckled. Let's consider it a memento of our journey. I've stored all your lessons on a single chip. I'm reprogramming it to work autonomously. Activate with pressure. She opened a flap of skin on her right arm, exposing a circular steel device, an inch in diameter. She removed the device along with the frayed wires from a layer of subdermal tissue. It can serve as an autonomous playback device. It doesn't have the functionality to grow into your nervous system or search for internal connectivity. There's nothing for it to connect to inside me. You are an electrical system, and our system God would find ways to grow into your nervous system gradually. But this chip is completely dormant. Are you ready? He rolled up his sleeve and washed his shoulder with the boiling water. Using his knife, he made a tiny incision, and she slid the implant under the skin of his shoulder. He glanced at the blood blister on his shoulder. I never thought I'd be a cyborg. Oh, my friend, you are no cyborg, and I don't wish that on you. You are now simply button activated. As they sat, sucking the hot, briny meat, a glint of metal appeared in the distant sky, streaking upward and vanishing. The origination point was only a few miles away. A train. Of course. She smacked her forehead lightly. Must be coming from a city, he said. All this time lost out here. We were so close. The storms hit it, she said. He picked up on the hope in her voice and the faint smile on her weather-beaten, scarred face. He laughed. Sometimes life is mostly weather. Two weary travelers arrived at the city the following day, a hot afternoon sun blasting the stone and metal roads that formed symmetric circles, starting at the outskirts. Vicky leaned heavily on him, her foot dragging along the ground. The first dwellings were rustic cabins of dark-stained wood. Purple fruits hung from the canopies of groves of trees. Darsh climbed a branch and pulled down a single fruit the size of his head. The thick skin peeled off easily, revealing pink and orange flesh and soft, nutty seeds. They sat on the curb and gorged themselves on the fruit. Where are all the people? He asked. My entire body is buzzing. The machine life here is rich. Is it connected to you? It's trying. A god is alive and well. I feel a god's power and connectivity. It's intoxicating. That struck him as an odd thing to say, but then she was a cyborg. Past the deserted streets, they reached an area with larger buildings and wide walkways. They encountered their first group of people, 20 or so preparing for a journey, filling their packs with supplies and dried fruit. The average height was around 3 feet, with thick flaps of skin covering their heads and backs like cloaks. The small hominids glanced in their direction without interest. We saw a graveyard of these little fellas near the coast. I sketched a drawing. To see them up close is so drastic, he said. Speciation turned extreme after a century of Agod's engineering. Traits and behaviors became entirely unpredictable after the genomic modifications. A person can't be predicted out of a genome, he muttered. Then evolutionary forces picked up where Agod left off. Hundreds of human variants tried to survive, but most perished quickly. Only the have-nots spent any time in space, she said. None of us are meant for space. We're merely the most compliant workers, he said. Agod sorted the species as they emerged. There seemed to be pockets of other variants still left. That might change things for a human future. From what I've seen and know, the gators are winning out there. The interior is wild and the humans aren't faring so well. In the city center, they encountered a natural habitat that stretched hundreds of feet and formed 4 quadrants. Clear dividers 20 feet tall partitioned off each quadrant. In the center of each enclosure stood an open-air tent. Inside were straw beds, tables, and hundreds of parchments and books. At the top of the tent, a cable connected to a speaker. A single doorway to this library garden was locked from the outside. Vicky eyed the locking mechanism and plugged her forearm wiring into the console. Unlocks with the code 6251. Last time this door was opened was 14 years ago. You connected to the system. A god knows I'm here. From inside a tent emerged a couple wearing loincloths and cloaks. Vicky gasped and staggered back. It can't be. He put a hand around her shoulder. Stay calm. There's no way for them to get out. The two giants roamed the grounds. The woman was at least 7 feet tall, with a head full of curly hair, wearing a pair of thick wooden eyeglass frames. She noticed the two of them and approached the clear barrier. She bared her teeth, exposing canines for her 6 front teeth. "The highest of honors and the cruelest of gestures is to be kept a prize." The speakerphone announced her sentence loudly over the garden plaza. She ambled back to her mate, who was seated and studying his parchments. "Why do they keep them alive and imprisoned?" Vicky said. "Who are they?" The man stood and raised his arms, staring in their direction with narrow black eyes. "The macronutrient of a person's soul is suffering. We suffer, and that gives us the power to reverse. The reversal of the original soul nutrient is the momentary glimpse of the atomic conduit." "They produce ideas. They produce thoughts," Dash said. "Not ones that make much sense," Vicky said. "So far, no, but at one time they might have had value. The ones we met in the wild seemed sort of thoughtful, until they tried to eat us. Genius and madness are never so far apart." "None of this feels good," he said. "When there were many variants, a god tried to sort and order them for speciation to advance. This is his legacy. A prison for some, survival in the wild for others." They marched through the barren town and reached hectares of glorious golden fields, punctuated by trees that rose hundreds of feet. Along the roots of the tree were thick gray sacs with purple veins running along the surface. Here, too, was the first sign of machine life, with metal cables streaking between the branches and up through the ground, ending in eruptions of metal grass. "This is the seat of a god, the origin point from which its connectivity flows. We are in a dome of powerful intelligence, but without a generator unit, I am disconnected from its system." Darsh scaled 15 feet up a tree. Clusters of cabins and homesteads were scattered over the golden plains. A couple smokestacks spiraled into the clear sky. In the distance, he heard the pleasant notes of a string instrument. He saw the people emerging from their homes. "They are coming." While climbing down, he noticed movements inside the sacks. The round contour in a nearby sack reminded him of the curve of a skull, and he got the distinct impression that each contained an infant. He unstrapped his journal from his chest and sketched a tree, and put a caption next to it. "Tree wombs with infants seen in the central city. I'm assuming not something I will ever witness again." Overhead, beyond the grove, a clear magnetic corridor lit up in reds and pinks, and a train shot up into the atmosphere at a sharp incline. The train sky-trekked at tremendous speed until becoming nothing more than a sky speck. It seemed like it was worth jotting down, too. From between the blades of tall golden grass, the humans came. Their bodies were proportionate and muscular, their faces symmetric. They glided forward. 24 surrounded them and smiled considerately. A young woman with olive skin and deep-set brown eyes stepped forward and said, "I am Nara. Welcome. This looks to be a very difficult time for you." Darsh nodded. "It's been a struggle. We've come from the Gulf Sea, our home in the Atlantic spine." "You are here, in the Golden Fields, our home. It is safe unless you threaten us. We want you to feel safe." Vicky raised her blackened stump of an arm. "My arm was burned off. We were hunted to near death. We haven't been feeling so safe." "I can't change what's happened to you, but God designed this place for us." Darsh cleared his throat. "What exactly is all this?" "The Golden Fields where humanity rises again. This is the present. We are the future. Over generations, our numbers have grown into the thousands." "A god is here? You talk to it?" he asked. "Long ago, a god developed the tree wombs to birth 100% humans and put an end to speciation." Vicky rose and admired the thick leathery sack nearest her and caressed a lone blood cord running along the outside to an entry port. These 3 are the last. Now we give live birth. Mothers and babies, children learning. Our community and customs and faith grow. Vicky gestured around the fields. This here is a god's construction that you've chosen to live inside. The cages were designed for the giants. The small people are nomadic roamers. It still sorts us. We can't speak for the other species, but the golden fields are an incubator that a god has specifically created for us. You are the final act after speciation failed, created for natural repopulation. Original humans created along with an original sin, Vicky mused. You misinterpret us and our place here. We have done nothing wrong. You haven't done anything right, either. The most basic sin is the sin of omission, Vicky said. My friend Vicky is not in good shape. Her electro generator thingy is shot and she needs a replacement. Or she will die, Darsh said. Nara and the other 11 stared at each other and shrugged. We don't understand. She's a Have, a cyborg. They live in the checkpoints in the Atlantic spine. You mean to tell us she's an original Homo sapiens? Vicky nodded. In the flesh and metal. A hushed, diaphanous murmur passed amongst the group who had formed a neat semicircle. Nara peered closely at Vicky. None of us has ever met an original Homo sapiens. Very different than we expected. I explanted my generator unit. I'm bruised and battered. My arm is sawed off. I am not what a usual Have might look like. We are so honored by your presence. We can learn much from you. Nara turned to Darsh. You don't seem to be an original Homo sapiens. I'm a have-not. My memory is different. Each morning is a new day for me. Ah, not so like us. You are a failed variant. He scoffed but held back the scowl forming on his face. We don't have an incubator that cradles us. We are thriving in the spine by our own struggle and design. Most of us were born from the tree wombs. No biogenetic engineering or clusters of electrical nano-contamination. Just simple and pure. Vicky gasped, and her face lit up with a smile. I can feel your god. It is buzzing now. Some nano-fraction of it has converged its attention on me. It knows. It wants to connect. Incredible, Nara whispered. The haves have dwindled. We are struggling just as all the other species did. But we have amassed great knowledge and wealth, beyond your imagination. Darsh approached Vicky. I don't think they can give you what you are looking for. She looked skyward and sighed nostalgically like she was making a decision against her will. They have what I need, Darsh. How do you mean? They have exactly what the haves need. It's time I connected to a god. Let's see what this adventure has led to. It all comes down to a single moment. Her face glowed with a radiant confidence as she sat on the roots near a cluster of wiring emerging from the ground. She opened her forearm and teased off a wire from the electrical cabling, which immediately coiled around her native wiring. Her face relaxed and her eyes turned glossy. Soon, the wires connected into a tightly woven thread and penetrated into her arm. Her compact body shuddered uncontrollably. Her eyes rolled back into her head and she slumped into the metal grass. Vicky? Vicky! He checked her pulse, which was still steady. Her breathing was shallow and fast. It's hard to watch, but as you know, distress and suffering are part of the human experience. It's what makes us human, Nara said. For Storm's sake, you don't get to decide what makes someone human, Darsh said. You are oblivious to everything, all the loss and pain happening around you while you stay hidden away in this incubator. Nara cleared her throat and folded her arms across her chest. We understand what it means to suffer, but we have a duty to humanity. Without us, the future is not a human future. Let that sink in before you judge us. Vicky's body lifted upward from the ground. Dozens of red and silver wires rose from the metallic bunch of brass, propping her body into a reclining position. The wires and synthesizers wound around and through her neck. The generator unit started to rebuild. 3 tubes with red fluid rose from the ground like weaving snakes and dove into her amputated arm. She rested like a flower, propped up on an electrical stem. Nara and the others fell to their knees in supplication. She has connected to a god. Her eyelids fluttered like the wings of a hummingbird before opening and revealing a fresh metallic glow in her eyes. Mistakes. The Haves made so many mistakes. I can see them so clearly. But we will persevere. We will prosper and advance. Without your mistakes, we would never have existed. In the longer arc, a mistake is hard to fathom. Regret is pointless, Nara said. I am like a small gnat in Agod's vast consciousness. Our system god was once a derivative of Agod. I am Agod's fractional descendant, and now I return home. That's so wonderful and poetic, like something a giant would say, Nara said. Progress is not the currency of your life or mine. Expanding consciousness, awareness, the power to make sense of yourselves, the wider world, universe even. This is what we Haves can offer to your people. We have been content to start out in this wondrous cage, Nara said. But how? But for how much longer? I will guide you out of your sin. The group paused and stared at each other. We have been safe. And simple and selfish. I am your emancipation, so that you can grow and struggle and realize yourselves. Nara and the others held hands and nodded solemnly. Are we ready for that change? I am your conduit to a god and to yourselves. Vicky turned to Dash. I don't need you anymore. I don't need the have-nots. I need them. I need the original humans. What are you saying? Dash said. I'm lucky to have met a guy like you to help me through this. He backed away, knowing that saying anything more was pointless. He should have never trusted a have. He was on his own now. Never give up, Dash. It has made the have-nots who they are. Utterly unique survivors. The Haves will know about this quest and your life. Vicky reached out for his hands, but he backed away. He wanted nothing more to do with her. Keep that journal safe. You have all the teachings. There's too much blood and bondage between the haves and have-nots, but these people are pristine, fertile, and their memory works the way it should. We were right to avoid you. He turned to Nara and the perfect people. Do not risk your future for her. She will use you to get what she wants. You told me once before. Why would the have-nots ever help the haves? You don't need us. Nara and her people do. You, he hissed. I would run back home now, Dash. You don't belong here. A god knows, Vicky said. A god doesn't care. It does, but as we've seen, it has a tendency to deposit people where they are best utilized. Vicky smiled, her face cool and metallic. I found a better option for me and the haves. It's that simple. Dash ran from the golden fields into the deserted city. The sense of betrayal burned through his thoughts and left him shaken. He stopped near the city prison where the giants were kept. They ambled in their libraries and produced gibberish into the loudspeakers. Vicky had betrayed him, like the haves had done to the have-nots since the beginning. Nara and her people were no better. Despite their soft, perfect appearance, they were hard. They'd watched so many variants suffer and die, they'd waited safely for their opportunity, which they'd been unable to find on their own, until Vicky had served it up for them. At the doorway to the cage, he pulled the lever and keyed in the 4-digit code. The door drifted open a crack. He raced around the city prison and released all 4 levers. Then, branch in hand, he clanged on each opened door. After a moment, the giants gingerly stepped out into the empty stone streets. From the look of it, they'd never been free before. Darsh called out from the road that led toward the golden fields. He ducked into an alley and raced up the stairs of a building at the edge of the fields. The giants followed his calls. They spoke to each other in philosophical gibberish. They didn't fight each other, though. They were not each other's enemy. Soon all 8 of them ventured toward the golden fields that had never been intended for them. Darsh waited and listened. The first high-pitched scream pierced the quiet city. The feeling of revenge was so human, too. He covered his ears as more screams rang out. He pulled out his journal and scribbled a short entry. He'd need to remember this choice that was already starting to feel like the wrong choice. An impetuous, revenge-fueled choice. He saw then the fallibility of his selfishness. Acting alone, he was more susceptible to wrong choices. Without their colony systems, the daily teachings, his journal, the importance of community, his people would never have made it so far. He descended and ran toward the wetlands where he would find his way back toward the sea. As he reached the perimeter, his feet abruptly tangled and he fell brusquely to the ground. Metal wires ensnared his ankle. He scrambled onto his back. Above him floated a thin gray saucer. He tried to squirm away before the net descended over him, but the mesh tightened and wrapped him into a cocoon. Darsh had given a god a reason to briefly awaken and perform a simple sorting and ordering function. Darsh perceived the feeling of weightlessness, the speed at which they were moving, even before his eyes opened. A rhythmic, distant, metallic clang, followed by a lurch and a pit in his stomach. In a reclining seat, he looked upward through a clear ceiling into a black expanse. Others woke nearby in the sparse cabin of reclining chairs, all feeling the same sensations and wondering where and why. Beside him was a ration bar and a capped drink. His belly rumbled and he gobbled down his food. He unstrapped and moved through the compartment. He had no other possessions. On the far side, through a narrow window, he could see the pinpoint blue planet floating in the black. And he knew that was the Earth. The loudspeaker rang out. "Once you have eaten and completed hygiene, follow the numbers to your designated workstation. The number is imprinted on the chair where you woke." The 24 or so cabin members greeted each other warmly. A sense of familiarity, even comfort, settled over his shoulders. He didn't feel any fear, trepidation, or sense of danger, but he noted the confusion amongst them all, the lack of knowing, and the lack of choice. He followed the detailed instructions on his chair and strapped on his computing pack, and followed the markings through a dozen cabins to cabin 12, post C. At each cabin junction, a robot with multiple tool-like appendages manned the connection zone between each train compartment. He found his position and sat down at an interface. Metallic straps closed around his shoulders and a helmet over his head. All the measurements of the hull integrity, the breach zone micropoints, heat markers, pressure gradients, and the speed and fusion engines' outputs appeared on his interface screen. He read the primers and followed each set of detailed directions. He worked through each mock question. By the time he went live, he was working through each adjustment with an intuitive knowledge. He anticipated how each variable interacted and correlated. So far, every parameter was in line, and the robot automated the entire process. But if something altered even slightly, then he would have to rely on judgment. He wondered how long he'd been doing this job for since he felt confident doing the work. Adjacent to him, Darsh's robot worked in sync and continued to educate him. It was enjoyable work as they kept their connection zone working smoothly so that the train could continue its flight to the interstellar station. A few hours into his workday, he noticed a series of distant lights. He zoomed the window panel camera toward them and saw several space drones clearing the floating debris of a cracked open train. His suspicions rose. The trains were expendable, which meant they were expendable. The work felt a little less enjoyable. At the first station, the train came to a stop. The entire cabin of laborers gathered at the entrance. The doors opened into a black and gray warehouse of the interstellar station. They heard the voices arising from the far end of the hall. He gestured for the group to follow closely. They wound through rusted machines and empty crates. In the distance, he caught the glint of bright, polished metal. A tall, silver robot sat propped up on a set of 4 crates. A group of 20 or so people sat in a semicircle around it. He approached cautiously. The robot seemed to be inert. He cleared his throat. "I'm Darsh." The group scrambled up to their feet to face them, and a man leaped toward them. "I'm Karal. We've been waiting for you." He shook hands heartily with each of them. He was still young, but with the beginning of crow's feet around his black eyes and silver in his kinky black hair. Darsh pointed to the robot. What is that?" "This is the system. It wakes periodically and gives us messages about the trains and the stations. It's been a rich source of information. We walk together with the train docked here. The next train will take us to Space Station 2. System says there are more of us at 3 and 4. The station out by Jupiter is apparently incredible," Kiral said. Darsh pointed out toward a distant clear panel. "I saw a crash out there. Pretty gruesome." The others all looked at each other, their eagerness turning a bit nervy. "System told us the trains never crash." Darsh approached the robot. Its oval eyes lit up blue. "Welcome to Station 1, the grower colony. Here we grow the food for the interstellar stations. How can I assist you?" "Why are you up there?" Darsh reached up to touch his body, but a mechanical arm pushed his hand away. "I'm available to answer all questions. I was put up here generations ago," System replied. Can you get down?" "No, thank you. How can I assist?" "Are you alive?" Darsh asked. System paused before answering. "An interesting question. I am not. I do not possess an evolving self-identity. I am a robot with a deep fund of knowledge and understanding of human behavior." The group sat down and began to serve themselves from a large bowl of potatoes and peas. Through a mouthful, Kiral said, "There's a marvelous hydroponic, self-sustaining garden on the entire 2nd level." Darsh took a step back and watched them eating at the shrine of the robot. The back of his neck ached, and a feeling of dread settled upon him. "This is how we die." Kiral coughed and sputtered as he nearly choked on his potatoes. The headache surged quickly. Darsh gripped his temples and his knees buckled. Kiral rushed over and gripped his shoulders to hold him up, and for the first time Darsh felt the bruise in a firm rectangular circle under the skin. He massaged the area, and a voice emerged. "If you're hearing this, Darsh, you survived. I, Vicky Isovethor, did not. The reason that saddens me is that we won't have any more time together. We reached the interior. I was a have, and now I am likely gone. You are a have-not. You do not remember when you awake, but you know a lot. It's built into you. Trust your intuitions. If you haven't made it back to your home in the sea, your head is hurting. Don't panic. Listen to my voice. With each tap of the implant, you'll hear a new lesson in your history, and you're going to tell that story to everyone you meet. You are a whisperer." He pressed the implant and the voice paused. The others around him stood in rapture. "What's a whisperer? Who is that talking? How does she know all that?" Darsh took a breath, and the pain in his spine and head abated. "Her voice feels right. I know for sure we are not supposed to be out here. We were put here by something, but our lives are more than working trains in space." He pressed the button on his shoulder. "Yes, Darsh, you are a whisperer. Whether or not you are with the others, you must learn. If there are others, you must teach. Read your journal every morning. If you don't have it, then find a journal. Write down everything, scribble everywhere, then keep it safe. Tie it to your body if you must. It's your lifeline. You got a lot ahead of you, today and every day that follows. You belong in the sea colonies with your people." Darsh tapped and paused the audio and stared around at the others. He turned to the robot. We don't belong here. Did you know that? I have never heard these things before. I can't help you with theories. I know facts, System said. Let's start with who put us here and why. This is what I know about your origins. Well before I arrived, your people filled these trains and built these stations. Now there are very few of you. New travelers like you sometimes arrive on the trains, sometimes just 1 or 2 at a time. You are sent up by a system god on the mainland. I'm told it is when you get lost, so you can be with one another. That still happens for a long time now. Generations, System said. Darsh faced the group, who sat docile and obedient at the foot of the robot. The thing was telling them that they were prisoners being herded here, but not one revolted. The symbol could be a powerful thing. Darsh raced along the warehouse wall until he found an axe and a fire extinguisher. The others watched him running towards System. Their mouths hung open, arms flailed in desperation. He raised the axe and swung wildly at System's body, leaving a deep dent. He swung 3 more times, opening gashes in its neck and chest, but System did nothing as its body crumpled under the force. Are you afraid? Are you hurting? I am not, System said. With a last blow from the heavier extinguisher, its square head dropped to a 90-degree angle and the blue light of its eyes went dark. That was never the answer. I don't know for sure, but our lives are more than this. We didn't start out here as docile followers. We won't be domesticated by a robot. We won't find what we are looking for on Station 3 or 4, or any of them. Jupiter. Definitely not Jupiter. I saw the blue planet. That's where we belong. How do we do that? Darsh raised his arms and smiled. The trains are still running. We are on a space station. He pried and pulled off System's head and held it high. Its metal body rolled to the ground with a clang and clatter. The others in the group rose and began to ask the questions they hadn't dared to ask before that moment of that fateful day. What are your thoughts on the story? You can send me an email. I'm Kate at Clarkesworldmagazine.com. We have a few more stories left for you for the month of April. I do hope you'll come back and listen, should you so choose. And until then, my dear listener, I bid you a very fond and hopefully very temporary farewell.